So first of all, welcome to our Carbon Literate Educator launch. We are very excited to be able to launch this accreditation, and we're very happy to see so many of you here already. Next slide, please. So just a quick introduction from us. So my name's Anna Ramakne. I am the Education Officer here at the Carbon Literacy Project. So I support Sarah Davis, who is our Education Coordinator at the Carbon Literacy Project. So we mostly work with universities and colleges, but we're looking to work a lot more with schools this year as well. We also have Dave Coleman, who is our Managing Director and co-founder of the Carbon Literacy Project. And we're also joined today by Sasha Beswick, who is the Sustainability Officer at Barnsley College. And she's going to give us some insight today about how she's taken carbon literacy within the college and really helped to facilitate their sustainability journey there as well. Next slide, please. Thanks. So just quick housekeeping rules. So this session is being recorded. As you can see, your mics and your videos are turned off. So you won't be recorded in the recording. It's just for us to use on our webpage so we can show people what the CLE accreditation is and so that people can get more information from there. So if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A function. We won't be taking questions as we go. We have dedicated time at the end to run through any queries that you have around the standard. So feel free to put in there whatever questions you have around the standard. And as I said, if you want, you can post in the chat who you are and where you're from too. And we're also having an opportunity for more questions at a later point. So in around 2 weeks' time, we'll be holding some drop-in sessions for those interested in applying for the CLE accreditation as well. Next slide, please. So just to quickly go through the agenda for today. So we'll go over to Dave in a bit, who's going to go through the need and the rationale for CLE, so the need for Carbon Literate Educator accreditation. Then I'm going to pass over to Sarah, who will go through what CLE is, so kind of an introduction to the standard, what you need to do to attain the accreditation, and kind of the ins and outs of the process there as well. As I said, we're joined by Sasha from Barnsley, and she's going to be talking to Sarah about their carbon literacy journey at the college there as well. Then I'll go through a bit about the application process, so what you need to apply for CLE and kind of the documents essentially for that area there. And as I mentioned, we'll have dedicated time at the end for Q&A. So any questions you have as we go along, just put them in the Q&A function, and we'll have time at the end to answer those for you as well. So firstly, we'd just like to kind of go over what carbon literacy is. We feel there's probably a good mix of people who are very engaged in carbon literacy, and perhaps some people who are potentially quite new to carbon literacy as well. So carbon literacy is defined as an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community and organisational basis. So it's essentially having people educated about climate change, so knowing greenhouse gases and their emissions, kind of the human impact in relation to climate change, but also illustrating what we as individuals can do to make a positive change there as well, and motivating us to make that change too. So it's not just what we can do personally, it's what we can do collectively as well, so within our communities and within our organisations too. And just to give a bit of background to us as a Carbon Literacy Project, again, for those of you who might be quite new to us, so we're a registered charity, and we started here in the UK in Manchester over 10 years ago now, so back in 2012. And we often get a bit confused in terms of people think that we train. We don't train people, unfortunately. Instead, we accredit courses as being carbon literacy. So we accredit climate education that is specific to certain audiences as being carbon literacy training. And we assess learners who have attended those courses as being carbon literate as well. So we don't just work in the education sector, we work with lots of different organisations and different sectors around the world. And within the education sector, we have training materials that we can provide to universities and colleges as well. So these have been developed by our university partners. So at Manchester Metropolitan University, Rachel Dunk has developed carbon literacy training for universities, for further education, and for further and higher education leadership as well. And Petra Modern Hill at Nottingham Trent University has developed carbon literacy training for universities as well. And these are resources that we can provide to educators to help educate their staff and their students around climate change and to help them take collective action as well. So once you've completed your carbon literacy training and have become carbon literate, you get your own certificate to demonstrate that. So it's an additional qualification for students that they can take forward to show to employers once they finish at school, college or university, that they have that knowledge and that skill set and that ability to take action against climate change going forward into the workplace. So again, just going over kind of the scale that we run at now. So I started at the project around 3 years ago, and we had around 17,000 people who were certified as carbon literate. And as you can see, we've massively increased since then. So we have over 81,000 people certified as carbon literate. And part of carbon literacy training, learners are required to pledge carbon reducing actions. So that's something, an action that they can take personally to reduce their own carbon emissions, and also something they can do collectively with other people to reduce emissions as well. So from that, we have over 162,000 actions that have been pledged as a result of carbon literacy training. So that's over 162,000 actions to positively fight against climate change, essentially. And that equates to around 293,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that's based purely on the actions that we've had come through. It doesn't accommodate for kind of the cultural change within people in terms of the habits that they make after training as well. So we have lots of courses that are delivered all over the world. As you can see, there's 25 nations delivering, and we've got over 6,000 organisations who are engaged in carbon literacy. But as you can see, there's only 211 carbon literate organisations. So in terms of the carbon literate organisations, so these are organisations who have a certain number of people within their organisation certified as carbon literate, and they're taking extra actions around that as a result of their carbon literacy training as well. Next slide, please. So these are some of our educators who have achieved a CLO accreditation, so our Carbon Literate Organisation. So we have Vardine College, City College Plymouth, UCLan, De Montfort University and Staffordshire. So this is just our CLO applicants from last year, and we have many more that we possibly don't have time to list at the moment as well. But as we found, CLO accreditation doesn't quite meet the requirements of educators and kind of fit within the systems that they work within, which is why we've developed the CLE accreditation. And now I'm going to hand over to Dave. As I mentioned earlier, so Dave Coleman is the co-founder of Carbon Literacy and the managing director of the Carbon Literacy project as well. And he's just going to go over a bit of the rationale behind creating the CLE accreditation.
Thanks very much, Shanna. Firstly from me, welcome to our launch event. Thank you very much for spending the time with us and for coming along and attending. My name is Dave Coleman. As Anna has introduced me, I co-founded the project with Phil back in 2012 when we first went published, and I'm now the managing director of the project. So when we founded the project, we had some ideas and vision of how far this concept could travel. But as you've just seen from that slide, whilst we dreamt that we could achieve these kind of numbers, the progress that the project has made is absolutely amazing. And that's not down just to the fact that we have a really good team of people around us. It's very much down to all the people and organisations that have supported carbon literacy. And the education sector is absolutely at the front of that. We've always been involved with the education sector. It was part of the working group that designed carbon literacy. And in fact, the very first carbon literacy course ever delivered was actually delivered at a university, at Manchester Metropolitan University, as the very first carbon literacy course, as the part of the very first pilot. We've had a long connection with the education sector. So Anna's already covered a little bit about what carbon literacy actually is. We're not going to go through a lot of detail of the process. If you want to know more about that, there's lots of information on the website, but we're going to assume that most of you are already quite familiar with carbon literacy and possibly are experts in all sorts of areas. So we're going to focus reasonably quickly on what we're doing specifically with educators and the new Carbon Literate Educator standard, which is what we're launching today. So when we launched carbon literacy, we started with a blank sheet of paper. And very much we were designing something that meant that an individual could become carbon literate, and it was all about individuals. But we were approached very quickly by organizations who said, we've got lots of people who are carbon literate. Does that mean we can call ourselves a carbon literate organization? And we said at the time, kind of yes, a bit, but it needs more than just having a lot of people. What we needed was a standard that showed that an organization was culturally carbon literate, not just that it had a lot of people, but that culturally it bought into carbon literacy and was delivering carbon literacy and acting on climate in all the different areas in which it operated. So we created a standard called the Carbon Literate Organisation, or CLO standard, which has been very successful. Started off very slowly, but now we're getting a surge in interest from all sorts of organizations. However, fairly quickly after we launched CLO, we realized it worked well for nearly every type of organization other than educators. Educators didn't fit neatly into the way that the Carbon Literate Organisation had been designed. It isn't every organization that expects to lose 100% of its workforce to turnover in 3 years and lose a third of it every year. And yet that's the indication of a highly successful university. So clearly some of the criteria we had for organizations didn't work well with educators. In some ways, the standard was too easy for educators to get because a handful of people could become carbon literate and get bronze CLO. But if a couple of leaders were carbon literate, did that mean an entire educational setting was culturally carbon literate? And the answer was clearly no. But equally, as you started to try and go up through the levels of carbon literate organization, it was really hard for educators, much harder than for other kinds of organizations. So the standard was both too easy and too hard all at the same time. And we realized that we needed to do something that was much more specific to educators. Educators also have a unique level of agency. Most organizations can talk to their staff, their customers, their stakeholders. It's fairly simple. But for educators, there are learners. There is the staff body within the educator, and that means the academic staff, but also those staff that support the operations of the educational setting. Then there are parents and families and communities. There are other stakeholders. There are governors. There's the local authority. And educators connect with these and many other organizations. So we really wanted to create a standard for educators that allowed an educator to show and demonstrate its carbon literacy, engaging with all of these different audiences and the unique level of reach and agency that educators have. But we also wanted something that applied to everyone. And that was a particular challenge because some of the educators that have engaged already with carbon literacy are universities with tens of thousands of students, and some are parish schools with 100 pupils, if that. And we really wanted a standard that addressed schools of all sizes, primary, high school, secondary school, colleges, universities, and therefore a whole range of types of organization and a whole range of different sizes of organization. So we've tried to develop a standard that allowed us to do that, because one of the core principles, as you'll probably know, of carbon literacy is that it's consistent everywhere, but it's also adapted everywhere. And we wanted to create a consistent standard that enabled us to talk to organizations of all types and all sizes, and also at different places on their journey. So some educational settings have just engaged with sustainability and are now taking their first steps on their journey. Other organizations have been eco schools for a decade and have done stacks of things historically and are very advanced. And we needed our standard to address that. And we also wanted it to address some organizations that maybe have done fantastic work with one particular audience. Maybe they're really good at outreach and connecting their learners with the communities that they come from, but have trained quite a small proportion of their learners. And others that may have trained all of their learners, but done nothing with, or minimal things with staff or governors and all the other settings around them. And yet we wanted both to be able to be celebrated for their achievement, but just encouraged to work in other areas. So we needed a standard that was also particularly adaptable. So we've tried to design something that addresses all of these challenges, and therefore it's quite distinct from the historic Carbon Literate Organisation standard that will continue for other organizations. But we hope that you will look at what we've designed for you and find it satisfactory. Early in the design process, we went out and did a consultation with a number of different educators If you've ever done consultations like this, you can imagine we've got stacks of feedback, nearly all of it helpful. Inevitably, some of it contradictory. People wanted it more complex and simpler. They wanted it more in depth and slower or quicker. Some people wanted it cheaper. Strangely enough, not many people wanted it more expensive. That was the only one that possibly wasn't in conflict. But nevertheless, we responded to all of that very helpful feedback, actually completely redesigned the standard again, and we've come up with something that we hope that you will find satisfactory. As I've explained, we have a long heritage working with educators, and educators have a unique reach in terms of changing our culture. Over 14,000 of those 81,000 people who are carbon literate come from the education sector, from schools, colleges and universities. So we've been very successful working together in partnership. And we hope that this new standard, which we're going to show you in a little bit more detail now, lays an even stronger foundation for us to work together. Because as we all know, all of us, when working together, can achieve far more than any of us can working alone. So enough of the introduction bit. I'm now going to hand over to Sarah, who's going to tell you a little bit more about the standard itself.
Thank you very much, Dave, and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Sarah Davis. I'm the Education Coordinator here at the Carbon Literacy Project. Hopefully I've met lots of you who are on the call today. If not, I'm sure our paths will cross as you delve into carbon literacy and perhaps choose to take up the CLE accreditation. So my job today is to explain the CLE criteria to you so that you leave this session with an understanding of what the requirements are for you to apply to reach the CLE criteria, to be accredited as a CLE organisation. So I'm going to start by, just hold on one moment, my slides just seem to have gone slightly crazy. Okay, back to where we were. So, as people have said so far, Dave and Anna have both said CLE stands for the Carbon Literate Educator. Educator in this context doesn't actually mean like star teacher or star lecturer. We are making an accreditation here for the entire institution. So it's been designed to accredit formal educational settings from secondary school levels through to colleges and sixth forms and universities. It's a 3-year accreditation. So that means that if you apply this year in April, it will last until April 2027. However, there are different levels of the CLE criteria. There's bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, and each level increases in terms of its achievement. So we would look at bronze as being the kind of entry level, so to speak, going right through to platinum, which is our highest level, where we're really looking for some transformative action. So whilst the accreditation lasts for 3 years, you are able to upgrade during that time, providing that you meet the increased criteria. So what are the main aspects of CLE? So CLE encompasses a wide range of audiences. Like Dave's just said, as educators have such a wide influence within the communities that they're part of, with their students, the future leaders of tomorrow, people going out into their careers and into their futures who need the green skills, mindset, and knowledge to be able to contribute meaningfully towards net zero, towards reaching a zero carbon society. So it's really about providing those skills. But we know that students can go to a lesson and have a fantastic lesson on climate change, but then they can come out into the institution. And if that lesson has not been mirrored in the institutional practices or the premises, then that learning is undermined. So we need to be considering more of a whole school approach with a decarbonisation of processes and premises and practices. And of course, that includes teachers and lecturers having the subject matter knowledge to be able to deliver effective lessons and learning experiences with confidence and in a meaningful way. And of course, that means that leadership needs to be involved for that to be embedded at a systemic level throughout the institution. So we are asking for this wide range of audiences to really support the learning ultimately. Now, in terms of the actual criteria, as Dave mentioned, we've worked on this for quite a long time, actually, trying to come up with something that reaches educational settings and appreciates the diversity and the uniqueness. So we've come up with something that has both mandatory criteria and some self-selected actions, which ultimately will enable educators to tailor a differentiated CLE accreditation. Now, I used to be a teacher, and talking about differentiation was a hot topic and super important because we need to meet learners where they are. And so we've embedded that philosophy into the CLE accreditation so that ultimately we recognize that there are lots of diverse types of educational settings. And just like the climate crisis, no one size fits all solution will suffice. Our responses to it have to be diverse. So CLE seeks to be inclusive and an accessible accreditation to celebrate all of the achievements of the diverse educational settings. Now, what are the benefits of becoming a CLE? So first and foremost, you will get a personalised CLE certificate, you will get an award and an invitation to celebrate your award at our CLE ceremony, which will be later this year in autumn time. You'll also get rights for the usage of the exclusive CLE logos and branding, which you'll be able to use on your website and promotional materials to help really showcase your commitment to embedding a low carbon culture through the cascade of carbon literacy. So they're the material benefits of becoming a CLE. But what about the real benefits? Well, let's talk about student expectations. So SOS UK did some research, I think last year, and found that 88% of students want to learn more about climate change and sustainable development. Speakers for School did some research back in 2020 and found that 85% of the students that they surveyed would actively research an organisation's green credentials when deciding whether they were going to go and work there or study there. So you can see that there's a clear business case for CLE, that by advertising to prospective students that you have been accredited by the Carbon Literacy Project shows a real commitment to climate education, but also climate action, as well as the ultimate aim of education, preparing learners to go into their future careers and to navigate their future with the skills that they're going to need. Now, it's an externally verified qualification and accreditation, and it's used by education, but it's also recognised and used by businesses, education, and the wider community. So, like Anna touched on before, there are over 6,000 organisations that are currently engaged in carbon literacy training. There are over 600 courses that have been accredited as carbon literacy courses. And what my point is that carbon literacy offers a certification that is being widely used across multiple sectors and multiple organizations, meaning that lots of people, lots of different generations with different backgrounds have had the same sort of training and understanding around climate change and the issues, their role within it, but not only that, what they can actually do about it. So we're looking at that societal shift, that cultural transformation, and it allows people to join the global movement of carbon literacy. Now, let's talk about the accreditation criteria. What are we actually asking you to do? So there are a couple of different aspects. Now, this part is the mandatory aspect. And this is where we're asking for a number of people to be certified as carbon literate. Now, the number of people that are going to be certified, that need to be certified, depend on the educational setting type, i.e. whether it's a university, a college, or a school, the size of the educational setting, and that's been determined by the number of students and the level of accreditation that you're deciding to go for, whether that's silver, gold, or platinum. Just a note, at bronze level, there's a minimum requirement for training for staff and students. It's once we get to silver and above that we start asking for a percentage. Now, this percentage represents the entire educational body. So what do I mean by that? I mean the educational body should encompass the members within the educational setting, such as the staff, the students, and the leadership. So you can see here, for example, if we look at the top row, you can see that a university with 10,000 students or more would need to have 15% of the educational body certified as being carbon literate. If it was gold, that would increase along with the level of achievement to 25%. And if it's for platinum, it would increase again to 40%. So we'll have this on our website where you can look at this in detail and see where you're at in terms of what kind of institution you are, the size of institution you are, and what level of accreditation that you are looking to apply for, to see what the percentages would be for your unique setting. Now, within that, we're also asking for a minimal percentage of people who are trained. So, for example, we're asking for 5% of the student numbers to be trained, 5% of the staff numbers to be trained, and 1% of leadership for silver. For gold, we're increasing that to 10% of students, 10% of staff, and 2% of leadership. And for platinum, 20% of students, 20% of staff, and 3% of leadership. So these student numbers are a percentage of the entire student numbers. Now let's see, what does that look like in practice? So let's say, for example, you're a university and you decide that you want to apply for silver and you have 4,000 students. So that would mean that you would need 25% of the full educator body being certified as being carbon literate. Now, let's say within the university, there's 1,000 members of staff. So we have a total of 5,000. So we're looking for 25% of 5,000. So this equates to a minimum of 5% of students, and a minimum of 5% of staff. So that means that 200 students and 50 members of staff. In addition, we'd be looking for 1% of leadership, which means 10 leadership staff. Now you can see here there's a total of 1,250, and I don't blame you for thinking Sarah's maths is absolutely awful. 200 plus 50 plus 10 does not equal 1,250. But rather, the point that I want to make here is that these percentages are a minimum. If you wanted to train 10% of your students, 50% of your students, 10% of your staff, that would be fine. 20% of your leadership. How you make up that total is up to you, but we're asking for a minimal percent. And the reason that we're asking that is to ensure that all audiences within the educator body are being trained and certified and being given that vital knowledge. So we've got the sort of bottom-up approach from the students, we've got the top-down approach from leadership, and we've got that middle-out approach from staff to really get carbon literacy and decarbonisation actions going at a systemic level. Now, I know I just provided an awful lot of complex information. We have got the Q&A open, so if you need further clarity, please do ask questions and please stay on at the end. As I said, there'll also be a lot of documents on the website to support this and to help you with this. And Anna and I will be able to help you with this at a later date as well. Now, in addition to that, we're also asking that educators evidence an increased number of actions taken for each level. Now, when you download the CLE standard, you'll notice that we have put together a defined action list. And this action list contains a range of actions which are suitable for different stakeholder groups, be that students, leadership, staff, and it also details the types of evidence that you could submit along with that. In addition to that, there is the option of choosing a self-defined action. So something that you come up with that perhaps isn't on the list, perhaps you're working in a different area and with a different group of people, and that's probably fine. We have guidance documents to support the creation of those actions, and all you'll need to do is to chat to myself and to Anna to just ensure that they will be strong enough and impactful enough actions to reach the CLE standards and be worthy of the accreditation. The second part of that is that we're also asking educators to engage with different number of spheres of influence at each level. So what am I talking about now? So the spheres of influences, these are basically the audiences that we are asking you to engage with. Now, we've split this into 5 different categories. So we've got students, staff, community, estates, and stakeholders. And within those categories, we have different subgroups. So if you look at staff, you can see that split into teachers and lecturers, academic and student support, professional services, and management and senior leadership. Now, you might look at this and think, oh, well, we're working with somebody else. We're working with a local business, or we're working with this particular group and it's not listed. Do just check with us, because this is not in any way meant to be an exhaustive list. These are suggestions to help you and to inspire you to think where you could be working, but you may find that you're doing something different, which may also be counted. Now, I've talked a lot and given you a lot of information. So I'm going to break things up a little bit now and introduce our guest speaker. And our guest speaker has engaged with a lot of the spheres of influence with a lot of the work that she's already been doing. And our guest speaker is Sasha Beswick, and she is a sustainability lead at Barnsley College. And as a graduate in environmental science, Sasha has volunteered and worked for several private and public sector organisations, both in the UK and overseas, all within sustainability related roles. Now, as a sustainability officer in the further education sector at Barnsley College, Sasha aims to harness the power of further education to accelerate climate education and prepare the next generation for a low carbon future. So hello, Sasha, and welcome to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Sarah. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can hear you fine. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm very pleased that we are launching CLE today. I'm very excited. So Sasha, can we start? Could you start by telling us a little bit about Barnsley College and your role at Barnsley College?
Yeah, absolutely. So Barnsley College is located in Barnsley, South Yorkshire. It's a fairly large college with multiple campuses, and we also offer different levels of education. So I think when people often think of colleges, they just think of school leavers 14 to 16, which is obviously what we do. But we also have lots of other levels of education offering, such as apprenticeships, sixth form, higher education. We also have a farm and lots of other different types of levels of education that our community can get involved with. And a little bit more about my role. So our vision as a college is to transform lives, and obviously sustainability is a huge part of that. And it was a huge part of that before I joined as well, which is why they recruited me, as a dedicated sustainability officer. And it's my role to oversee and deliver the sustainability strategy with an aim of obviously getting the college to net zero, but also ensuring that our learners are prepared for a future in a low carbon economy.
So in terms of your role, I mean, I know some of the things that you've achieved at Barnsley this year, and I was just thinking, you know, you said it was doing really well in terms of sustainability before you joined. What was the situation?
So it was happening, sustainability was happening a lot more than we thought it was. So we're really lucky to obviously have excellent staff, and they always ensure that our learners leave the college with more than just their subject knowledge, and leave them with more of that wider world view of how to apply their knowledge in probably a less obvious but very sustainable way. And it was more about joining the dots and making sure that that was made obvious, and trying to understand better what was happening across the college as well. But actually, going back even further, the college, from an estate point of view, actually created one of the first local state-of-the-art sustainable buildings called the Think Low Carbon Centre. At the moment, it's not being maintained properly, but it still at the time showed that the college was really thinking about sustainability from an organisational perspective, and to act as more of a wider part of the community. So there was a lot that was happening before I joined, and there's a lot that's happened since, but the college has definitely always had it in its values, which is incredible.
So what was it then that made you decide, given that there was so much going on in terms of sustainability, what made you decide, okay, we're going to do carbon literacy training?
So I've actually had an experience with carbon literacy before I joined the college. So I used to work in local authority, and when I worked at Windsor and Maidenhead, carbon literacy was brought to our attention by a counsellor who'd been on a course and really enjoyed it. And that's when I also virtually met Jane Mork from Manchester Metropolitan University, who's co-created the education toolkit. And there we delivered carbon literacy to members of the community, counsellors and officers as well. So it worked really well. I then moved to a different local authority and we were delivering carbon literacy there, again to wider elected members and officers across the county. But when I came to the college, it was actually already being spoken about, which for me was a real motivator to know that they were already forward thinking. So what happened to kind of get it to that stage where they were even just talking about carbon literacy, our vice principal for finance, who sits on the executive board and obviously has a lot of influence across the college, attended a carbon literacy course, thought it was incredible, took it back to the governors, and obviously recognising that students need to leave the college prepared for a future in a low carbon economy, felt that it was really important that we equip our educators with obviously the necessary knowledge to make that happen. So when we wrote the sustainability strategy, we included a target to train 100% of our full-time permanent staff in carbon literacy. And we've already delivered this to 60% of our staff in the first year. So we decided to jump ahead and train our students too.
And how has it been received so far since you've been doing that enormous cascade?
Just to give a bit of background again into that cascading model, so it was decided to put it into the sustainability strategy, but we had, I think, a 5-year target on there. I could be corrected on that. But to get, all of our staff trained, I think we've got between 800 and 1,000 staff within that time frame is a big ask. And obviously, to get all of our staff out of the office for a day, which sounds, over 5 years, something quite reasonable, but actually to get, some of our vital staff out for a day to do training can often have a wide impact. So we decided to train, I think it was around 50 staff, so at least a few representatives from each department in carbon literacy, which again, Jane Mork and Liam from Manchester Met came and delivered to that small cohort of staff. Those staff became carbon literacy ambassadors. They then trained all of our staff during a staff development day, and obviously it wasn't all of our staff because we couldn't get everybody in on one day, but it was the majority. And those staff then delivered it during CLAD and the week of Carbon Literacy Action Day to Education Day at COP. So that's how it's cascaded. But in terms of how it's been received, very well overall, which is fantastic, and also a big risk when you're introducing something for the first time en masse. But the majority of the staff found the training interesting and applicable and relevant to their roles. They left feeling that they understood their role in terms of how they can influence the sustainability strategy. And we're also already seeing staff taking their pledges very seriously, both inside the college, but in their personal lives as well, which is just absolutely fantastic. And most importantly, it's brought all of our staff up to the same level of understanding. Well, not necessarily same, because some people already had an understanding before, but the necessary level of understanding to be able to influence the college and make sure that our educators are equipped as well. We obviously don't need everybody to be climate scientists, so that's where we wanted to get everybody to. On the student side, again, obviously, we have, like I've mentioned before, and I'm really biased, but we do have incredible staff, and they adapted the training to their learners, depending on what subjects they studied. And whilst it was, to be honest, whilst it was new information for the students, they found it really valuable, and they really appreciated especially the opportunity to be certified, which recognises their efforts just as much as an exam certificate does in many ways. So yes, very well received.
Fantastic. I mean, it's great to hear about how you've gone about how you've gone about the cascades and how you've gone about delivering carbon literacy to the different audiences, and obviously really inspiring to hear about how well that's been received as well. I'm just wondering, I know you talked there a little bit about what's happened within Barnsley College. I'm just wondering, has been anything else in terms of sustainability within the wider community that has been a trigger or has been triggered or initiated by yourselves and carbon literacy training?
Yes. So when we were talking to stakeholders about our carbon literacy training and our plans to roll it out in the college, we're also part of the Barnsley Positive Climate Partnership, and I know lots of local authorities have climate partnerships now where the wider community can get involved. So we're part of the Barnsley one, and it was received as very inspirational to a lot of the stakeholders in that group, and we actually decided to create a task and finish group called the Education Task and Finish Group as part of the partnership. And in there, we actually created a local Barnsley specific carbon literacy toolkit, which has now been delivered already by our college independent training services department. So it's already spreading further, and we hope that once our students become more confident in their carbon literacy and the pledges that they're carrying out, that they will too become trainers and have an opportunity to practice that and facilitate some of the ITS sessions. So it's going really well in terms of the community aspect. And just this morning, I had a meeting with some of the PCP members who are still talking about carbon literacy, but over the borders as well, trying to get other climate partnerships to get involved and other colleges as well, sharing that information. So generally, in terms of the community influence, really well. And I think as an educator, or as an I'm not necessarily an educator, I'm not a teacher, but as an educational institution, the influence that you have over the community should never be underestimated. And the resources that you can share and collaborate on are endless. So it's definitely been a good opportunity all around.
Wonderful. I'm really pleased to hear about that and super exciting about your meeting as well this morning. I'm just wondering, I know that last year you were awarded as a bronze CLO, and huge congratulations. I'm just wondering, how did the accreditation help in gaining support within Barnsley College?
So the accreditation sparked interest from our wider leadership and governance team, and obviously they recognised that the bronze CLO was like already a step towards our carbon literacy journey. But if anything, because we achieved bronze, and obviously it was mentioned previously that for educators it was often quite easy to get bronze and not as easy to move forward. The college didn't necessarily want to make a big announcement until we'd achieved silver, gold, or platinum. So if anything, it was more motivation to keep on aiming higher. And we'd already accelerated in that model. So when it was announced that CLE was coming, we were all like, oh no, well, how do we progress further? But in essence, it worked really well. And it was a catalyst to further our journey to carbon to another CLO or CLE status. And it widened our influence in the community. Like I mentioned before, other people were wondering, what's this award? What was this wonderful ceremony that you've been to? How can we get involved? So it really sparked an interest in those that can make higher decisions than I can, which was wonderful.
Fantastic. And I'm really hopeful that you'll be applying for a CLE accreditation this year, and you'll be joining us later in the autumn to celebrate being one of our first round of CLE educators, CLE accredited educators. I don't think I'm getting the phrasing quite right there, but I hope you'll be there at our first ceremony. And I'm just wondering, after hearing about the CLE criteria and seeing the spheres of influence, how do you think that you'll be able to use that to inspire, ignite more action? I'm not trying to undermine what you're already doing. You're doing a phenomenal job already, but
yeah, so obviously, like I mentioned before, we'll be using it to further motivate our staff and students, and the power of recognition should never be undermined. But also it'll help influence the wider community. So when we've spoken with businesses, especially when delivering the local toolkit, and we've mentioned the CLO award, it sparks their interests even further, and it gives that extra incentive to get involved, but also to recognise the different measurements of success and how they set out, maybe along their competitors as well. But like I mentioned before, we can't underestimate our roles as educators in the community and the relevance that Carbon Literacy has to that. So obviously CLO is very important and relevant to organisations, but for education, Carbon Literacy is an education course. So with an actual award for education, it makes it more relevant. It makes our actions more meaningful. And I think, although I'm biased because I'm in education, I think CLE is often more, it could be more influential than the CLO because, like I said, it's Carbon Literacy is exactly what education is. It encompasses all of the values that all educational institutions have. So I think, if anything, it's going to accelerate that journey further. It'll help bring stakeholders on board with us. And yes, we will be applying for CLE. I need to look at the standard a bit more to see what more we need to do. But yeah, we're pretty much already on track. And I think if we announce, especially to our students, but obviously our staff as well, that they could be part of meeting another award, and a part of that, it helps their CVs, it motivates them to get involved in something wider. And in terms of our community project as well, it could motivate them to become facilitators and trainers, and again, go up that Carbon Literacy trainer model, which again is exactly what all about what education is for.
I couldn't agree more with you. I completely agree about the importance and influence of education. And I'm going to just bring the interview to a close, sadly, because I could talk to you all day. But I just wanted to ask you a question, because I often get asked by people within educational settings who are new to delivering carbon literacy training, how do they make the case? How do they make the business case? How do they overcome barriers? How do they deliver at scale? How do they gain support? And you've managed to do all of this with phenomenal success. I mean, I haven't actually mentioned it yet, but Sasha was one of our Sasha and Barnsley College were one of our CLAD Catalyst winners in December, which is a Carbon Literacy Action Day, and actually certified over 820 people in one day, which is absolutely phenomenal and mind-blowing. So my question to you, to come back to my question, sorry, is I wondered if you have got any tips and advice for people on the call today who are trying to start their cascade with carbon literacy.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key drivers to start carbon literacy, as I mentioned before, was having our leadership on board. So having a vice principal actually attend a carbon literacy course was it influenced the people that make the decisions in the college, and that was really important. We then had to instill confidence across the college that this is something really important for our learners. But the only way you can do that is to be confident that this is the way forward. So I suppose if you've not done carbon literacy or attended an information session even about carbon literacy, that would be the first step, and then get your leadership on board. And most educational institutions are made up of a leadership team and governors. Just one of those people can influence the rest of that cohort, which is amazing. But to be honest, even if it's not one of those, even just an engaged staff member, and they just take it into their classroom, to 30 learners, will have a huge impact. And although you mentioned, obviously, we did get a huge number of our learners through carbon literacy, which even I'm still in disbelief by that it actually happened so brilliantly and organically. Any learner that's carbon literate is a huge success. The opportunity to cascade is even further. So have confidence in what you're delivering, and what you're taking back to your institution would be my strongest piece of advice.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Sasha. And thank you very, very much for joining us today and giving us some insights into your inspiring story and Barnsley and the inspiring stuff that's going on in Barnsley College. So I'm going to now hand back over to my colleague, Anna, who is going to talk to you now about the application process of CLE and what you actually need to do in order to apply for the CLE.
So in terms of transferring from CLO, so obviously a few of you already have a CLO, so like Barnsley College, for example, you obviously perhaps looking to transfer over to CLE. So the work that you've done for CLO can count towards CLE. It's just ensuring that you still meet the additional criteria that are within the CLE accreditation. So there's several different options around how you might want to transfer over to a CLE, and we'll be in touch with all those organisations currently as a CLO. So the first option would be to transfer across to the same level of CLO accreditation to CLE accreditation. If you're bronze CLO, as long as you meet the CLE criteria, you can transfer straight over to bronze CLE. Just in that case, the remaining CLO time that you have will be the same. So if you have 6 months left of your CLO, you'll have 6 months of your CLE at the same level, after which point you'll need to renew or reapply for a higher level from there. You can obviously stay as a CLO until the expiry date. So if you have a year of your CLO left and you want to wait until the end of that 3-year period collectively to apply for CLE, then you're more than welcome to do that as well. But you can obviously upgrade to a higher CLE level than the CLO level you're currently at. So if you are at a bronze CLO and you want to apply for either silver, gold, or perhaps platinum, so long as you meet those criteria, you're able to beef up those levels as well. Just in terms of CLO itself for educators, so CLO is no longer open to educators. It's only CLE that you need to apply for. So either you would transfer over or you would need to reapply for CLO once your CLE, sorry, you need to reapply for CLE once your CLO has completed. Next slide, please. So some of you may be thinking, could potentially a single subunit apply? So instead of the organisation as a whole. So a single department can apply for CLE rather than the whole educational institution, so long as they have a taught student body. So your university, for example, you may just want your science department to apply for CLE accreditation, which is more than possible as you'd be engaging with students within the university in that capacity as well. It's just if a department doesn't have direct student interaction, but they would like to gain a carbon literacy accreditation as kind of more organisational wide, they wouldn't be eligible for CLE. So instead they would have to apply for CLO. So a finance department, for example, might be within kind of the university or the college, but they don't directly engage with students in terms of teaching them. So they themselves would apply for a CLO, but they could still collectively count towards an overall CLE accreditation from there. Next slide, please. So many of you are probably potentially thinking about pricing of the accreditations. So CLE is a paid for accreditation, much like our CLO accreditation. But like with any of our carbon literacy pricing, it's not a blanketed cost that we charge as a standard price. It's a tiered pricing system that we have. So this is just to ensure that it's a bit fairer for kind of different organisations, depending on their turnover and things. But within education, we've determined this by educator type and educator size as well. And there's more details on our pricing matrix that has been updated today as well. So you can find that on our documents page on our website as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of what you would gain within the CLE application pack, so the standard is now live on our website, where you can find everything, more information about the Carbon Literacy Educator Award, and also have all the documents there for you to see how to make your application and what criteria you need to meet for the different levels. So within the application pack, we have the CLE standard, so that notes all of the criteria for each of the different levels going from bronze through to platinum. And we also have our CLE application form. So this sits alongside the standard and details what criteria you have to meet for each level, and provides that space for you to demonstrate how you have met that criteria for the accreditation. And that would then be sent over to us for assessing the application from there. We also have a separate copy of our spheres of influence. So as Sarah elaborated, we're expecting kind of engagement with different communities, either internally within the educator or kind of externally within communities and businesses as well. We also have a CLE action development guidance document. So as Sarah mentioned, in terms of the actions that we expect to be taken from silver, gold and platinum within the accreditation, you're open to develop your own actions so long as they meet certain requirements and can be deemed kind of carbon literacy educator actions to take. So we put together guidance that helps you kind of structure your action to help it meet the criteria as well. Next slide, please. So in terms of next steps from going forward from this session, it would be going to our webpage, and we'll post a link in the chat in a minute so that you can go there very easily to find all the documents that you need to review to see what level you'd like to apply for, kind of what criteria you currently meet and what you might have to do to kind of meet certain elements as well. And after doing that, so we'll be holding a CLE drop-in session in around 2 weeks' time. So on February the 6th, we'll have 2 of these running on the same day just to try and accommodate a bit more in terms of the timing of sessions. So there'll be one at 12:30 and one at 3:30. So that would be on a Tuesday as well. We'll be sending around links to these events in a follow-up email after this session as well. And obviously, Sarah and I are open to having discussions around the accreditation as well. So you can always get in touch with us. We'll put the specific email address in the chat as well, because it would be CLE@Carbon Literacy rather than the education email for these inquiries. Then from there, it's obviously making your CLE application, completing all the criteria and all the relevant documents, and sending that through over to us. And then hopefully you can then gain your accreditation after we've assessed your submission and seen how you meet those criteria as well. And once you've gained your accreditation, so you'll obviously get your certificate, but you'll hopefully be able to join us for our first CLE awarding ceremony, which, as Sarah said, will hopefully be in the autumn, October time of this year as well.
So thank you very much, guys. Thank you to Sasha as well, and Deepika and Sajan from our team who've been sat doing all the technical stuff in the background. Thank you very much, everybody. We look forward to seeing you again soon. For now, bye-bye.